The scent of fresh-cut grass tangled with cheap cologne, a nauseating perfume that reeked of summer and regret. Today, it was only regret. The late afternoon sun glinted off Mason's graduation cap, its tassel swinging in rhythm with the joy bouncing off his proud smile. My son. Our son. He stood tall, a beacon of hope, while beside me, Robert, my husband of 22 years, shifted in his seat, his phone buzzing like a wasp trapped in silk. That vibration wasn't new. But today, it stung deeper. The sound pulsed louder in my ears than the applause surrounding us. His hand twitched toward his pocket, a reflex I'd seen countless times. My heart sank. Then came the final blow. He stood, not to cheer, not to embrace our boy, but to flee. I have to take this, he stammered, avoiding my eyes like a guilty child. And just like that, he vanished, a flash of polished shoes and betrayal swallowed by the crowd. Mason's name rang out. The auditorium erupted. And I stood there alone, applause crashing like waves while the truth settled in. He chose her, again. I didn't need to hear the voice on the line. I already knew. Before I dive into the full story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever been left behind but chose to rise anyway. Your support makes these stories of strength possible. Our life before had been a tapestry woven with comfortable routines and shared dreams. Mornings in our sun-drenched kitchen were a ritual. I'd be up first, the gentle hum of the coffee maker a comforting prelude to the day. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, dark and rich, would drift through the house, a silent invitation for Robert to join me. He'd usually appear, rumpled and charming, a wry smile playing on his lips as he reached for his favorite mug, the chipped one Mason had painted for him in kindergarten. We'd sit across from each other at the worn oak table, the local news murmuring from the TV in the corner, a gentle backdrop to our quiet conversations about the day ahead. He'd talk about his meetings, the intricate world of corporate finance, and I'd share anecdotes from my design studio, the latest client challenge, the triumphs of a new commission. Our hands would often meet across the table, a fleeting touch, a silent affirmation of our connection. Our evenings were a different kind of calm. Dinner was a collective effort, Mason often helping me chop vegetables while Robert set the table. We'd laugh about Mason's latest exploits at school, debate current events, or simply enjoy the comfortable silence that only comes from years of shared history. The scent of garlic and simmering sauces would fill the air, mingling with the faint smell of Robert's aftershave and Mason's youthful energy. Weekends were reserved for family. Long walks in the sprawling state park near our home, the crunch of leaves underfoot in autumn, the vibrant green of spring. Summer evenings spent on our porch swing, fireflies blinking in the twilight, sipping iced tea and listening to the cicadas. Winter holidays, a flurry of baking and gift wrapping, the house filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Our annual trip to the coast, the salty air whipping through our hair, Mason building sandcastles while Robert and I watched, content in the quiet rhythm of our lives. I'd poured my heart and soul into our home, into our family, into him. Every thread of my being was intertwined with his, with ours. I'd built my design business from the ground up, juggling client meetings with school plays, late-night sketches with early morning breakfasts. I'd sacrificed promotions, travel, even a dream project in Milan, because Robert's career needed his full attention, and Mason needed a stable presence. It wasn't a sacrifice I regretted, not then. It was simply the unspoken agreement of our partnership, a shared journey where we supported each other's growth, or so I believed. My studio, a vibrant space filled with swatches of fabric, architectural blueprints, and the gentle hum of my laptop, was my sanctuary, my creative outlet. But even there, my thoughts often drifted to home, to the next family meal, to the quiet comfort of Robert's presence beside me. I was a woman who believed in permanence, in the enduring power of vows, of shared lives. My world was built on a foundation of trust, a solid, unwavering belief in the man I had chosen, the father of my son. And now, at Mason's graduation, that foundation had just crumbled beneath my feet. The subtle signs had been there, little flickers in the periphery, like dust motes dancing in a shaft of sunlight, easily dismissed, easily ignored. But now, in the harsh glare of betrayal, they coalesced into a damning montage. It started subtly, an almost imperceptible shift. Robert, who used to text me throughout the day, little jokes, quick questions, suddenly grew quiet. The chime of a text message, once a familiar and welcome sound, became a rare occurrence, replaced by the persistent, hushed vibrate of his phone when he was near. He'd always left his phone on the kitchen counter, or on his bedside table, a casual, open presence. Then, it started migrating. First, tucked into his pocket even at home. Then, face down on surfaces. Later, it was always with him, even to the bathroom, a silent, ever-present companion. I'd catch him typing furiously, his brow furrowed in concentration, only for him to quickly lock the screen when I entered the room. Work email, he'd mumble, a little too quickly. The easy, comfortable banter we shared started to fray. Our conversations became clipped, perfunctory. He'd ask about my day, but his eyes would drift, his attention elsewhere. His excuses for late nights grew more frequent, more elaborate. Client dinner ran long. Big presentation tomorrow, just pulling an all-nighter at the office. My heart, always eager to believe the best, would accept them. After all, he was a driven man, a successful executive. His career demanded long hours. I understood that. Then there were the financial shifts. Little things at first. A new, expensive watch that appeared on his wrist, a sleek, gleaming piece I hadn't seen before. A bonus, he'd explained, a shrug of his shoulders dismissing my raised eyebrow. But then, the credit card statements started to show unusual charges. High-end restaurants I'd never heard of, lavish boutiques far from his usual haunts, luxury hotel stays in cities he claimed to be visiting for work. My initial thought was that he was simply treating himself, perhaps indulging in some well-deserved luxuries after years of hard work. But the frequency and the extravagance began to prickle at my subconscious. I'd try to ask him about them, casually, over dinner. Oh, that was a team dinner, he'd say, or just entertaining a client. His answers were always plausible, always just vague enough to avoid deeper scrutiny. But the nagging feeling persisted, a tiny burr under the saddle. One Tuesday morning, I woke to the sound of his hurried footsteps. He was already dressed, coffee in hand, far earlier than usual. "Early meeting," he said, kissing my forehead before he left, the scent of a floral perfume clinging faintly to his collar. Not his cologne, which was sharp and woodsy, but something lighter, sweeter, distinctly feminine. I dismissed it as residual from a meeting, maybe someone he'd brushed past. But the image of it, faint and almost imperceptible, lingered. It was a week later, when I was tidying up the bedroom, that I found it. Tucked under his side of the mattress, a small, velvet jewelry box. It was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a shimmering emerald pendant. My stomach dropped. It wasn't my style. Robert had always given me classic pieces, pearls or simple diamonds. This felt different. It screamed of newness, of a fresh start. A gift for someone else. My fingers trembled as I opened the box, the cool metal cold against my skin. There was no card, no inscription. Just the cold, hard fact of its existence. He hadn't given me jewelry in years, not like this. A wave of nausea washed over me. I placed it back carefully, precisely, as if the slightest displacement would betray my discovery. The real shift, the one that pulled the rug out from under me, happened a few weeks before Mason's graduation. Robert was on a business trip to Miami. He'd sent me a few perfunctory texts, generic updates. One evening, scrolling through social media, a photo popped up on my feed. It was a mutual acquaintance, a distant cousin of Robert's, at a trendy restaurant in Miami. In the background, blurry but unmistakable, was Robert. And seated across from him, her hand casually resting on his arm, was a woman I didn't recognize. Her hair was a striking shade of auburn, and she was laughing, her head thrown back, a picture of effortless intimacy. My breath hitched. It wasn't the blurry image itself that struck me so much as the unbridled joy on Robert's face. A joy I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He was smiling, really smiling, a genuine, unguarded expression that sent a shard of ice through my chest. The kind of smile he used to save for me, for Mason, for moments of pure, unfiltered happiness. It was a mini-climax, a silent detonation within me. The subtle signs, the shifting behaviors, the unexplained expenditures, the lingering perfume, they all coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. He wasn't just working late. He wasn't just stressed. He was with someone else. The world tilted on its axis, a sickening lurch that left me gasping for air in our quiet, perfectly ordered home. The betrayal wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was a vivid, undeniable image, burned into my mind. I deleted the photo from my memory, but the image of their intertwined hands, the casual intimacy of her touch, remained. The initial shock was a physical blow, leaving me breathless, reeling. I locked myself in my studio, the familiar scent of paint and paper offering little comfort. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of my drafting table, the usually vibrant space now feeling cold and alien. Tears streamed down my face, hot and furious, blurring the meticulously arranged blueprints. It was a primal scream of pain, of disbelief, of utter devastation. How could he? After all these years, all our shared history, our son, our life together? The questions tumbled through my mind, a chaotic mess of accusations and self-doubt. Had I missed something? Was I not enough? Had I somehow pushed him away? The guilt gnawed at me, a relentless, insidious worm. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I had become too focused on my business, on Mason, on the mundane necessities of life. The shame was suffocating, a heavy blanket that threatened to smother me. But amidst the storm of emotion, a tiny spark of something else began to flicker. Anger. A cold, righteous fury that slowly, steadily, started to push through the haze of pain. It wasn't a wild, explosive rage, but a quiet, burning ember that ignited a new resolve. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window, my face streaked with tears, my eyes swollen and red. This was not me. This shattered, weeping woman was not Adeline. I had always been strong, resilient, a problem solver. I had built a successful business, raised a remarkable son, navigated countless challenges. I was not a victim. I would not be defined by his betrayal. The decision solidified, a hard, unyielding knot in my stomach. I wouldn't confront him in a fit of rage, wouldn't succumb to a tearful breakdown. No, I would handle this with the same precision and foresight I applied to my designs. This wasn't about screaming and crying, this was about strategy. The shift from vulnerability to quiet resolve was subtle but profound. It was less a dramatic transformation and more a slow, steady hardening. Each tear shed became a drop of fuel for the fire. Each moment of self-doubt was met with a defiant whisper, "You are stronger than this." I started to observe him with a detached, clinical eye. His late nights, his guarded phone, the subtle changes in his routine, they were no longer sources of pain, but pieces of a puzzle I was meticulously assembling. I began to spend more time in my studio, not to cry, but to think, to plan. I started to reread books on corporate law, on financial regulations, on the intricacies of marital asset division. My mind, usually focused on aesthetics and spatial relationships, became a forensic tool, dissecting every detail, every casual remark, every unexplained absence. I remembered a conversation with a colleague, a strong, independent woman who had gone through a messy divorce. She'd told me, "The best revenge isn't anger, Adeline. It's success. It's living well. But sometimes, success needs a little push." Her words, once a casual piece of advice, now resonated with a fierce clarity. I started to work late, not for clients, but for myself. The hum of my laptop was a constant companion, but now it was for research, for careful documentation. I learned about tracking apps, about public records, about the subtle art of digital forensics. I wasn't driven by a desire to hurt him for the sake of hurting him. I was driven by a powerful instinct for self-preservation, for justice, and for the protection of my son. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. This was about reclaiming my narrative, my dignity, my future. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it no longer paralyzed me. It fueled me. I was no longer Adeline, the heartbroken wife. I was Adeline, the strategist, the architect of my own future. My vulnerability had transformed into a quiet, unwavering strength, a silent promise to myself that I would not just survive this, I would thrive. The crucial turning point wasn't a single dramatic event, but a series of calculated, deliberate actions that built momentum, each step bringing me closer to reclaiming control. My first move was subtle, almost imperceptible to an outsider. I started with the financial records. For years, Robert had managed the bulk of our joint finances. He was the finance executive, after all, and I had trusted him implicitly. But now, that trust was shattered. Late at night, long after Mason was asleep and Robert had retreated to his study with his perpetually buzzing phone, I began to delve into our online banking. I accessed every statement, every transaction, every investment account. I cross-referenced dates, amounts, and locations with the credit card charges I'd already noted. It was a meticulous, painstaking process, akin to peeling back layers of an onion, each layer revealing a new, unappetizing truth. The pattern was clear: exorbitant spending on travel, lavish gifts, and what looked suspiciously like rent payments for a separate apartment. My stomach churned with every new discovery, but I pushed through the nausea, fueled by a cold, hard determination. The next step was to secure my own financial independence. I had my design business, of course, but much of our joint savings and investments were tied up in accounts controlled by Robert. I quietly opened a separate bank account, one he had no access to. I started redirecting a small percentage of my business income into it, a steady, untraceable trickle. I also consulted with my own clients, discreetly, about accelerating payments on outstanding invoices. I needed liquidity, a safety net that he couldn't touch. The pivotal plot twist, the moment the power truly shifted, came when I stumbled upon the love nest. The recurring address on the credit card statements, coupled with a cryptic text message I'd seen flash across Robert's phone one evening, provided the final piece of the puzzle. The text read, "Dinner at the usual spot, then back to our place." The address was unmistakable, a luxury apartment complex downtown. It was a Sunday afternoon, Robert was supposedly playing golf, and Mason was at a friend's house. My heart pounded as I drove towards the address, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I told myself I was just confirming that there was a logical explanation. But deep down, I knew. The building was sleek, modern, with large, impersonal windows. I found the unit number, the one from the credit card statement, and saw a familiar car parked in the designated spot, Robert's pristine black sedan. My eyes narrowed. It wasn't enough to simply know, I needed proof, concrete evidence. I had already contacted a lawyer, Sarah, a formidable woman with a reputation for sharp intellect and unwavering client advocacy. I had chosen her not just for her legal acumen, but for her quiet empathy, her ability to understand the raw, messy human emotions behind the legal dry facts. Our initial meeting had been an emotional tightrope walk. I had laid out everything: the whispers, the photos, the financial discrepancies. Sarah had listened patiently, her expression unreadable, her gaze steady. She had explained the process, the importance of irrefutable evidence. "He's a finance guy, Adeline," she'd said, her voice calm. "He'll try to hide assets, to play dirty. We need to be 10 steps ahead." Armed with Sarah's advice and a renewed sense of purpose, I made my move. The following weekend, while Robert was out for one of his golf games, I installed discreet cameras in the apartment building's common areas, the lobby, the garage entrance. I also purchased a small, high-quality audio recorder, the kind used by investigative journalists. My plan was risky, bordering on reckless, but I was beyond caring. I wanted to catch him red-handed, to leave no room for denial or manipulation. The hum of the corporate office, which had once been a source of stress, now felt like a distant, irrelevant memory. My world had narrowed to this quiet, determined hunt for the truth. The recorder was small, barely larger than my thumb. I placed it carefully in the glove compartment of Robert's car, knowing he rarely cleaned it out. I wasn't looking for a confession, I was looking for patterns, for casual conversations, for anything that could link him undeniably to the apartment and to the woman. The following week, the recordings yielded nothing conclusive, just idle chatter about work, a few phone calls to Mason. Then, one evening, as I was reviewing the latest recording, a woman's voice emerged, clear and bright, calling out, "Robert, darling, you're home." The sound of muffled kisses, then her voice again, closer, distinct. "Did you miss me, sweetheart?" And Robert's low chuckle, "More than you know, my love." The name she used for him, the ease in her voice, the undeniable affection in his response, it was all there. And the location. The faint sounds of the city, the distant wail of a siren, the precise ambient noise of their shared space. It wasn't just an affair, it was a parallel life, a carefully constructed illusion. The recording was the crucial turning point, the definitive proof. It was the moment I realized the extent of his betrayal, and the moment I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would not just survive, I would win. The power had shifted. It was now in my hands. The unfolding of my secret plans began with a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in my demeanor. I remained outwardly calm, even affectionate, allowing Robert to believe he had successfully pulled off his charade. This was crucial. I needed him to be comfortable, unsuspecting, precisely so he wouldn't start hiding assets or making hasty legal moves. Every interaction with him became a performance, a delicate dance of feigned ignorance and calculated smiles. The scent of coffee in the morning still filled our kitchen, but now, it was tinged with the metallic tang of deceit. Our casual conversations at the dinner table felt like carefully scripted dialogue, every word chosen to maintain the illusion of our normal, unsuspecting life. My immediate priority was to protect Mason. He was 18, on the cusp of adulthood, and his world was about to be rocked. I couldn't shield him from the truth entirely, but I could control how and when it was revealed. I started subtly preparing him, without betraying my true intentions. "Mason, have you thought about what you'd do if you needed to be more independent financially?" I'd ask casually, over breakfast. It's good to have a backup plan, just in case. I encouraged him to apply for scholarships, to explore part-time jobs, to become more financially savvy. I spoke to him about the importance of being self-reliant, of standing on his own 2 feet. These were general life lessons, easily accepted by an eager young man ready for college. He had no idea the urgency, the deeper meaning behind my words. The recordings from Robert's car and the apartment lobby were my most potent weapons. Sarah, my lawyer, reviewed them meticulously. "This is golden, Adeline," she'd said, her voice clipped, professional. "Undeniable proof of an ongoing affair and financial commingling. He's been supporting her, likely with joint marital funds. This changes everything for asset division." The evidence provided the foundation for a strategic financial move. My design business, while successful, had always been treated as a joint marital asset. Now, with Sarah's guidance, I began the process of restructuring it, legally and financially, to protect it from becoming a casualty of the divorce. I moved existing contracts and future projects into a newly established LLC, registered solely in my name, with no ties to our joint accounts. It was a complex, time-consuming process, involving countless legal documents and meetings with financial advisors. The hum of the corporate office felt miles away, a world I was slowly but surely extracting myself from. I also began to document everything. Every text message, every credit card statement, every whispered word from the recordings. I created a meticulous timeline of Robert's absences, his increasingly elaborate excuses. My home office, once a creative sanctuary, transformed into a war room, filled with file folders, legal pads, and the muted glow of my computer screen. I worked late into the night, fueled by strong coffee and an unyielding resolve. I imagined him, oblivious, enjoying his secret life, confident in his deception. And that image fueled my determination. The retaliation wasn't about vengeance in the traditional sense, but about dismantling his carefully constructed facade, piece by piece, and reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I instructed Sarah to prepare the divorce papers, to be filed precisely on Mason's graduation day. The day he chose to abandon his son for his mistress would be the day his world came crashing down. It was a calculated, poetic form of justice. While he was basking in the glow of his secret life, I was meticulously preparing for the quiet, effective unleashing of my personal power. The subtle shifts in my everyday life, the way I managed my finances, the restructuring of my business, the preparation of Mason for the inevitable changes, these were the unseen movements of a carefully choreographed plan. Each action, no matter how small, was a step towards self-affirmation, a quiet declaration of my unyielding strength. The hum of the corporate office, once a distant memory, was now a fading echo, replaced by the quiet determination of my own path forward. The aftermath of Mason's graduation was a storm, just as I'd anticipated, but I was anchored, ready for the deluge. Robert returned home late that night, his face flushed, a faint trace of floral perfume clinging to him even after hours. He offered a mumbled apology about the urgent call, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. I met his gaze, my own eyes cool and steady, giving nothing away. The next morning, the divorce papers were served. A sharp knock on the door, a delivery person with a neutral expression, and a thick envelope with Sarah's law firm logo. The sound of the paper rustling as Robert opened it was like the crack of a whip. His face, initially a mask of confusion, contorted into a furious disbelief. "What is this?" he spat, his voice rising, the carefully maintained calm of our home shattering into a million pieces. "It's a divorce petition, Robert," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, a stark contrast to the tremor in my hands. "I'm divorcing you for adultery. I have evidence." I watched his face drain of color, the initial anger replaced by a pale, sickly fear. He tried to bluster, to deny, to threaten. "You have nothing, Adeline. This is insane. You'll regret this." But his words lacked conviction. He knew. He could see the steely resolve in my eyes, the quiet confidence that replaced the heartbroken woman he'd left behind. The ensuing weeks were a brutal battle, a drawn-out war fought in legal documents and hushed phone calls. Robert, true to Sarah's prediction, fought dirty. He tried to minimize his assets, to accuse me of financial mismanagement, to discredit me. He hired a high-powered, aggressive lawyer known for their ruthless tactics. But I was prepared. Sarah, my formidable ally, calmly presented the evidence, the credit card statements detailing the apartment rental, the extravagant gifts, the lavish travel. And then, the recordings. The clear, undeniable voices, Robert's and his mistress's, discussing their shared life, their plans, their intimate moments. The silence in the mediation room when Sarah played those recordings was deafening, punctuated only by Robert's choked gasp. His lawyer, a shark of a man, visibly deflated. There was no denying it. The proof was irrefutable. The consequences for Robert were swift and severe. The infidelity clause in our prenup, which he had dismissively waved away years ago as an outdated formality, now loomed large. It stipulated a significant financial penalty for either party proven to be unfaithful. His carefully built financial empire, the one he had meticulously cultivated, began to crumble. He was forced to liquidate assets, to sell off investments to meet the terms of the settlement. The apartment, the one he had so casually funded with our joint marital funds, became a symbol of his ruin. He lost his prestigious position at the finance firm. The scandal, though initially contained within legal circles, began to leak. Whispers turned into open gossip. His colleagues, once respectful, now avoided his gaze. His reputation, once impeccable, was in tatters. The social ostracism was profound. Friends, mutual acquaintances, even some family members, began to distance themselves. The man who had walked away from his son's graduation for his affair was now a pariah, a cautionary tale. My own path was not without its challenges. The emotional toll of the divorce was immense. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, grappling with the grief of a shattered past, the loss of a life I had so carefully constructed. Mason, initially bewildered and angry, struggled with the news. He felt betrayed by his father, and confused by the upheaval. I spent hours talking to him, explaining, reassuring him that my decision was born of strength, not weakness, and that our love for him was unwavering. It was a difficult journey, but his eventual understanding and support became a powerful source of my resilience. But amidst the difficulties, signs of recovery, of emerging strength, began to appear. My design business flourished. Clients, many of whom had heard whispers of my ordeal, rallied around me, drawn to my newfound strength and independence. My work, once meticulously planned, now felt imbued with a raw, powerful creativity. I found solace in my art, channeling my pain into beautiful, transformative designs. I invested in a larger studio space, a vibrant, inspiring environment that truly reflected my independent spirit. I hired a small team, women who shared my vision and my dedication. The hum of the corporate office, a world away, was replaced by the lively chatter of my studio, the rustle of fabric, the clicking of keyboards, the shared laughter over design challenges. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my years of focusing solely on Robert and Mason. I started to explore new hobbies, to travel, to rediscover parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I went to that dream project in Milan, not as a sacrifice, but as a triumph. The city, once a deferred dream, was now a vibrant reality, a testament to my ability to reclaim my desires, my aspirations. Robert's downfall wasn't a source of malicious glee, but a quiet, profound satisfaction. He had made his choices, and he was now facing the consequences. My resilience wasn't built on his ruin, but forged in the crucible of his betrayal. I had risen from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and undeniably free. The ultimate rise, the affirmation of my self-worth, wasn't a sudden burst of fireworks, but a slow, steady dawn, illuminating a landscape I had meticulously rebuilt. I learned to truly inhabit my own space, both physically and emotionally. My new studio, a sun-drenched haven filled with vibrant colors and the scent of possibilities, became a tangible symbol of my independence. The old, familiar hum of a corporate office, a sound I once associated with Robert's career and our intertwined life, was now a distant, almost forgotten echo. My days were filled with the buzzing energy of creativity, the satisfying rhythm of design, and the quiet camaraderie of my growing team. The chime of a text message now brought news from satisfied clients, or a playful meme from Mason, who was thriving at college, a confident, self-reliant young man, a testament to our shared journey. I embraced my single life with an unexpected vigor. Dating, initially, felt daunting, a foreign landscape. But I approached it with a newfound clarity, a firm understanding of my own worth and what I deserved. I met interesting people, shared laughter, and learned that companionship could exist without the suffocating weight of deceit. There was no longer a need to analyze every casual remark, to look for hidden meanings in a phone call. The air was clear, clean, and filled with the promise of genuine connection. My evenings were no longer spent waiting for a delayed husband, but pursuing passions, learning to play the ukulele, volunteering at a local animal shelter, joining a book club. My life was rich, textured, and entirely my own. Mason's graduation, once a painful reminder of betrayal, transformed into a powerful symbol of our resilience. We took a trip, just the two of us, to the national parks, hiking through breathtaking landscapes, our conversations easy and flowing. He spoke about his classes, his friends, his dreams, and I listened, truly listened, without the constant hum of anxiety in my mind. He saw a different mother now, not just the stable presence who managed the home, but a vibrant, independent woman who had navigated a storm and emerged stronger. His pride in me was a quiet, profound balm to my soul. Robert's downfall was a public spectacle, and while I never reveled in it, I couldn't ignore it. The luxury apartment he'd leased for his mistress was repossessed, a symbol of his recklessness and disregard for marital assets. The mistress, it turned out, had moved on quickly once his financial well ran dry, leaving him isolated and increasingly bitter. His once smooth career trajectory plummeted, and he found himself in a low-paying, insignificant role, a pale shadow of the man he once was. The once warm family dining table, now a distant memory for him, was replaced by lonely, take-out meals. He had lost everything he claimed to value, his career, his reputation, and the respect of his son. The irony was palpable. His desire for a new, exciting life had led him to a hollow, isolated existence. For me, the triumph wasn't about what he lost, but what I gained. I gained an unshakable sense of self-reliance, a profound understanding of my own inner strength. The emotional intensity of the betrayal had forged a stronger, more resilient Adeline. I was no longer defined by my relationship, but by my own achievements, my own choices, my own unwavering spirit. I was a woman who had faced deep hurt and chosen to fight back, not with anger, but with intellect and foresight. My justice was quiet, poetic, and ultimately, profoundly satisfying. If this journey from betrayal to empowerment moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of unbreakable spirits. Share in the comments, have you ever had to rise above someone's cruelty? Your story